Sergo, it is February 9th, 2018. I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast on the Gwe, that's CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us with our audio streaming at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we are streaming live, video streaming live on Facebook Live. We post the shows immediately afterwards, both on Facebook, on SoundCloud, and the video from the show also makes it to our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV, usually by the next day. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer, and I want to give thanks to Kelly McMillan, who is our engineer, who helped us with the setup here. We opened up with Buffy St. Marie with No Kesha Kesha, and she mentioned a few things in there that are relevant to some of what I'm going to talk about today. So she talked about radioactive waste in the water. Well, I need to talk about what the hometown heroes are looking to do. And when I say hometown heroes, look, everybody loves the Pagulas. Everybody loves the owners of the Bills and the owners of the Buffalo Sabres, the hockey team, and owners of the Buffalo Bandits, the pro lacrosse team. Look, who wouldn't love the guy who comes in and throws millions of dollars to not only secure those franchises, but hopefully reinvigorate those franchises so that everybody's fanaticism towards sports can be realized through a wealthy benefactor, a wealthy guy who's willing to throw all this money. Well, one of the questions you got to ask is, where's the money come from? Kim and Terry Pagula have made their money off of hydrofracking, and there's no secret about that. I mean, he's made his money off of natural gas. He's hydrofracked most of, large portions of Pennsylvania. So a lot of the horror stories that you've heard about hydrofracking in terms of contamination, I mean, lighting up your faucet, having flames shoot out of your faucet if need be, all that's tied to this stuff. Look, I know there's been a lot of denial over the years that any of the natural gas that makes it into groundwater is not caused by hydrofracking. But the fact of the matter is, hydrofracking. And in case you don't know what hydrofracking is, hydrofracking is taking water with a bunch of other chemicals and using large volumes of that water and lots of pressure to crack open the shale formations. These are deep wells that are dug, and then these wells are dug horizontally. So it's not just about digging a hole down and hydrofracking. This is horizontal hydrofracturing. And so you're basically cracking the ground. It's fracturing the ground. And this has been tied to everything from seismic activity in terms of earthquakes to all kinds of groundwater contaminations, all kinds of stuff. I mean, increasing the amount of natural gas, making it leaking into the environment. One of the major causes of CO2 gas emissions is from natural gas just leaking into the air. And that is increased because of hydrofracking. Now, so what happens? You take all this water and you jam it into the ground, and of course, you take the water back out because that's how the natural gas. Or this is also used for hydrofracking oil wells, by the way. And of course, by cracking this stuff, all kinds of stuff comes up. Not just natural gas. I mean, you can't just create a crack and hope that only one subsurface substance comes out. No, there's all kinds of stuff that comes out. All kinds of poisonous gases, all kinds of radioactive materials. It exposes all of that stuff to both the water, and then ultimately exposes it to whatever is harvested or extracted from these wells. So the water is pretty well contaminated when it goes down, because here's what the oil companies do, or these natural gas companies do. They have their own special combination of chemicals they add to the water. It's not just water. It's water that's going to be has other stuff in it, so it'll be lubricant, and so it'll flow easier, and so it not only causes the cracks, but it causes the water to flow into those cracks more easily, and perhaps some stuff that would have the ability to dissolve certain minerals and that kind of stuff. But there's all kinds of chemicals, and the oil companies consider this cocktail of chemicals that's put into hydrofracted water initially. As proprietary. It's a proprietary formula, so they don't have to tell anybody what's in it. They also they aren't required to necessarily do a full evaluation on what the water has in it when it comes out. Obviously, it still has everything they put in it in the first place, but then it has more. It has all kinds of chemicals that it has been exposed to by being pumped to the subsurface levels, deep into the ground, exposing everything from radioactive materials, uranium, all kinds of stuff. I mean, so that water comes out. Then what do you do with it? Well, a lot of they use the water over again as much as possible, but ultimately they end up with a lot of wastewater. So this is how the Pegulas got rich. They did this throughout Pennsylvania and other places, but Pennsylvania has been most of their playground for this, and it's been a big source of their revenue. So they made all this money, doing these terrible things to the planet. But they got natural gas out of the deal. So then you got to figure out what to do with this water. Well, let me talk to you about one of the plans for this thing. So there's a place in Coudersport, Pennsylvania, which is about 20 or 30 miles south of the Pennsylvania-New York state line. And there's an organization called the Coudersport Area Municipal Authority. They leased land to a company called Epiphany Water Solutions, or Epiphany Allegheny LLC. Interesting name, Epiphany. I think when you have an epiphany, that usually means that you had some sort of mental breakthrough about realizing something. Well, maybe these folks need to have an epiphany. But anyway, so Epiphany Water Solutions leased land from the Coudersport Area Municipal Authority to build a wastewater treatment plant to process wastewater from high-volume horizontal hydrofracking. Now, one of the moneyed interests involved in Epiphany is Terry Pegula. The biggest customer for handling, that is intended to handle wastewater, this hydrofracted water, is JKLM Energy LLC, which is the company that Terry Pegula owns. So he not only has a moneyed interest in the wastewater treatment facility, but he's also going to be the number one customer. Okay, so what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having a facility that's going to treat this water? Well, for one thing, when water is treated, it is dumped. It ultimately is dumped into a water supply, a river. So, what river happens to run through Coudersport? Well, it's the Allegheny River. Well, wait a second. I thought the Allegheny River is in New York. No, it does come into New York. It does. I mean, these rivers don't understand state lines. So this river's headwaters are in Pennsylvania, and then it flows kind of west, but then northwest, crosses the state line, goes through towns like like Olean, right by kind of St. Bonaventure, and then a large stretch of it runs through the Seneca Nation territory of Allegheny. And then it dumps into the Kinzua Reservoir. The Kinzua Reservoir is this massive reservoir that was created when the federal government decided that they wanted to create a flood control for Pittsburgh. And so there's this dam that it's actually on the Pennsylvania side, but the reservoir is much of it's on ancestral Seneca land, And so what does that dam do? Well, one of the things that dam does is it dams up water, but it also prevents anything from flowing, the sediment and the contaminations from flowing down that river. Not all of it. Some of it will still flow. But ultimately, you think about these headwaters being in Coudersport, flowing through the Allegheny River, ultimately into the Ohio River, the Mississippi River, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So, but wait a second. They're going to treat this water, aren't they? Well, here's the problem. How are you going to treat this water? You don't even know what's in it, because these companies, these hydrofracking companies, these natural gas exploration companies won't release the information. And even if they did, can you treat water that is contaminated by radioactivity? No. This isn't something you can there's no such thing as a radioactive filter. You're not going to filter out radioactivity. In fact, many of the contaminants that are in the fracking water in the first place much of it can't be filtered out. And certainly what comes out of the ground, out of this wastewater from hydrofracking, many of it can't be. Look, a standard municipal water treatment facility, they can't they can't filter out or treat some of these contaminants that are in the water. They'll treat some of it, and they'll treat enough of it to say, oh yeah, it's safe. Just like GE did when they dumped all that water in the Hudson River, or when Allied Chemical and Crucible Steel dumped all their wastewater into Onondaga Lake. So you have the Hudson River, which was killed essentially coming out of GE, and then you have the Onondaga Lake, which was essentially killed, by chemical. And why? Because bottom line, it's the cheapest way to get rid of stuff. Just dump it. Just dump it. It's kind of like driving down the highway. You could stop and take your garbage and put it in a garbage can someplace. But, isn't it way easier just to throw that stuff out the window? Of course it is. Is it right? Of course it's not. And it's not right creating these hazardous wastes just so you can make money and then find somebody else's property, somebody else's, natural resources to dump it on. So what happens when you have this kind of hometown hero scenario where the guy you want to love because he owns your football team, he owns your hockey team and your lacrosse team, he's throwing all kinds of money into Buffalo and into the venues that these sports teams play at. So what happens when it turns out that guy's not such a nice guy? And maybe he is a nice guy if you judge him a certain way. But he may not be a nice guy when you judge him in terms of environmental issues. There was almost this belief that was kind of prevailing that he doesn't do that hydrofracking stuff anymore. Yes, he does. And not only does he still do hydrofracking, but now he plans to dump this hydrofracked wastewater through a water treatment facility and then ultimately into the Allegheny River so it can flow through a major portion, essentially the entire length of the Seneca Nation territory of Allegheny. Now, Seneca Nation has come out pretty strong against this thing. They've made their statements, and Todd Gates talked about how the Seneca people have a spiritual connection with that river. You know what? Okay. But we have a physical connection with it. All the spiritual stuff aside, I don't do the whole spiritual thing very well. But the people who live next to a river, it's not the spiritual connection, it's the physical connection. Nobody got cancer from their spirituality. Nobody dies of leukemia, really, because of their spirituality. They die because of the contaminations that are caused by physical acts. The physical act of contaminating water, of contaminating land, of contaminating air. I know it's nice to talk about the spirituality stuff. And by all means, everybody feel free to do that. But let's not pretend that there's not a physical relationship with that river. And the irony of it all is, so now you've got Terry and Kim Pagula, who plan to dump all this hydrofracked wastewater into a treatment facility that will ultimately dump it into the Allegheny River. Now, potentially, there isn't enough contamination that flows through our territory anyway because of what's happened with industry over the years. So now the Allegheny River is going to be facing this stuff. And we still haven't even fully dealt with the issues up in Cattaraugus, on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, where the Department of Energy and NYSERDA had this facility out near Springville in West Valley, which dumped radioactive waste into the headwaters of the Cattaraugus Creek. So now both rivers running through Seneca territory are going to are being exposed to the contamination of the American dream. chasing that money. Make that money. Make that energy so we can make some more money. Rip whatever has value out of the earth at whatever cost. And you know what? Don't just rip it out at any cost, but rip it out quickly. Because you know what? If I can't make that money in my lifetime, it's not doing me any good. So let's rape the planet in the fastest way. In fact, we're going to do this damage at a much faster rate than the earth can heal itself. Because you know what? Ultimately, the earth can heal itself. And when we've screwed things up so bad that our own sustainability as this dominant creature on the planet, gets at risk, when we're all gone, the planet will fix itself. It'll heal itself. And we will be a layer of sediment along with all the contamination that we've created. But in the meantime, we're living with all this stuff. And of course, there are plenty of other, people, other life and other parts of creation that are impacted by all this stuff. So where does this leave you? Where does it leave you? When an entire region, all of Western New York, and not just Western New York, because look, when you create these sports franchises, they have tremendous reach in terms of people who become fans. All along those rivers, both the Cattaraugus Creek, contaminated by West Valley, but now this river that's going to be contaminated almost personally by the owners of the sports franchises in the area. I mean, how do you reconcile that? We talk about cognitive dissonance. How do you support your local football team and your local hockey team, and from a native standpoint, your local pro lacrosse team? That being our sport, right? How do you support that? How do you endorse all of that when the owner of those teams is contaminating your river? And the only reason he is the owner of those teams is because he's made millions of dollars off of damaging the planet. I mean, how do you reconcile those things? Look, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how you deal with that stuff. So, and where does it leave people like the Senecas? And look, this isn't a Seneca only problem. But what happens is people become neutered in these conversations. People who say, "Oh yeah, but we need to stimulate the economy. We need the jobs. Yeah, it's going to damage the planet, but we need the jobs." It's kind of like, screw the spotted owl. We want the lumber. The hell with putting a ban on logging. We don't care about the spotted owl. This whole idea of the canary in the coal mine, which essentially the spotted owl is like it's kind of a strange analogy to call a spotted owl a canary, but when you look at how life is impacted, the most vulnerable life is impacted. In this case of logging up in the Northwest with the spotted owl, there are plenty. That vulnerability doesn't just stop with one species. So that's why it's important to pay attention to a vulnerable species. Who's the most vulnerable species in all of this with with contaminating the river? Well, there's obviously a lot of water life that's going to be impacted by it. So what do you do about it? Look, you can give, the buffalo speeches. You can give all the speeches about spirituality and about, our spiritual relationship to the river. And what a travesty it all is. But then you got to ask the next question. What's the relationship between the Seneca Nation, for instance, and the Pegulas? What's the relationship between the Seneca Nation and the Buffalo Bills, or the Buffalo Sabres, or the Buffalo Bandits? Well, I know these are tough conversations, but at what point, beyond trying to file lawsuits and getting legal injunctive relief against something that has a potential a potential contaminating effect on your river, which that burden gets placed on you to prove it. And much of this proof may not come for another 30 years. That's when the evidence really shows itself. But when you inherently know that an activity or a proposed activity is going to have negative impact on your people, what do you do about it? Do you sue? Yeah, you could. What about the millions of dollars the Seneca Nation spends promoting the Bills or the Sabres or the Bandits? What about that conversation? Nobody. I haven't heard anybody have that conversation yet. There's a lot of. This has been in the news, pretty good for the last month. And I make no apologies for having waited to have this conversation, but this is the conversation I'm having now. So my question is, does the Seneca Nation really step up? Do they go beyond the speeches and the spiritual rhetoric? Do they say, Mr. Pegula, we need to have a talk? We spend an awful lot of money in our relationship with the NFL franchise and the NHL franchise and the hockey, the lacrosse franchise. We have our suites. We have our luxury boxes at the New Era Field and at the Key Center, the Key Bank Center. We do all kinds of special events. We spend a lot of money. Yeah, that marketing is intended to market our gaming facilities. Look, you can't go to a sporting event and not see Seneca, Buffalo Creek Casino advertised in there, or the Seneca Allegheny Casino advertised in there, or the Seneca Niagara Casino advertised in there. Yeah, and you know what? And it's not just the Seneca Nation. There are plenty of Seneca business people who have put millions of dollars into these sports franchises. And there's other native entities. There are native business people from Six Nations, the Tonawanda, the Tonawanda Seneca territory, Tuscarora. Look, there's been a lot of money a lot of native money has gone in to these franchises. Whether it's advertising in these facilities, or whether it's doing any number of special events with these teams. I don't care how big of a sports fan you are. At some point, this comes down to the ownership, the guy who owns the team. So I know this is an uncomfortable question to ask. But who else is going to ask the uncomfortable question but me, right? And I'm not condemning the Seneca Nation. No. In fact, the Seneca Nation is in a unique position to not only raise the environmental issues, legally, but in that oldest expression, vote with your pocketbook, vote with your wallet, vote with your dollars. The Seneca Nation is now in a position, with the millions of dollars that they spend with these franchises in sponsorship, being official sponsors of these teams, and having these, hey, co-develop. Look, the Pegulas are very popular people in Buffalo. They spend millions of dollars, right? Developing facilities, expanding the Key Bank Center, hockey rinks, all kinds of ice skating rinks, the investments in the Inner Harbor, all of that stuff. Well, at what point does the Seneca Nation have to prioritize their position, not just on a general position on environment, but on the river that flows through their territory? Tough question. But there's some real pragmatic steps that the Seneca Nation could take in this thing. The question is, will they? Look, I've seen it all on Facebook. I've seen plenty of stuff on Facebook that raises the questions of, about this travesty, and there's some harsh words coming out against the Pegulas and how they made their money. It's an interesting thing. We're gonna take a break here at the bottom of the hour, but especially when it came to the purchase of the Buffalo Bills, that's a little bit of an interesting story for those of you who aren't completely familiar with it. Donald Trump has a role in this thing. It ends up being purchased by the Pegulas, but how did it end up being purchased by the Pegulas? There were other people interested, not just Donald Trump. So how did it end up being a bargain basement sale, being something that the Pagulas could pick up? Well, we'll talk about that when we come back. But, while we're on break, I just want you to think about that. I mean, if you're Seneca, and even if you're not Seneca, if you're native, is it, again, time to be heard? Is it time for your voice to be heard? So, look, why are we throwing our money at the feet of Terry and Kim Pagula? At the same time, we're going to have to, spend millions of dollars trying to fight them in terms of injunctive relief against them contaminating a river? I mean, if that's even an option. Look, there's no sense in being a financial powerhouse or having any financial clout if you don't use it to further the goals of your people. So just think about that as we go to break. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll go to break and be right back. Yahweh.
Your children in the classroom. English history. What do they teach about the Indians? Took us prisoner in your fight to be free.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Obviously, we're not just talking native. We're talking contamination. We're talking about water. We're talking about protecting water. And we're talking about, in a roundabout way, we're talking about football, hockey, and lacrosse, apparently. Before I get back into it, let me first go ahead and, we were talking money. Let's talk about the money that supports what I do here. I want to give a thanks to my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. Eric White and ERW Enterprises, good friends, individuals like Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and many others who have helped this show over the years. Again, we're in our 8th year here. 8 years. 8 years we've been doing. We're in our 8th year with this. And through many of those years, we were on commercial radio, and we had sponsorship. We had paid advertisers, and even many people, especially in Seneca territory, had played a role in helping us continue to do this show. So all of you have helped get us to the place where we're at today, even if you're still not helping today. So but I thank you all. I thank you all for doing your part, helping me entertain and inform and educate people for the last 7 years, and like I said, into this 8th year. I thank you all for doing your part and stepping up and being a part of the fight. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. I want to thank CKWE, both for their simulcast and the rebroadcast. But I also want to thank some of the other networks, Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, Indigenous Resistance Radio. I also want to thank all of you who share the show. Look, I know that, when we do the live broadcast, we don't have millions of people listening. Sometimes we have tens of people listening. But because the shows are shared, and my wife does a lot of that sharing, but many of you do. Because you're sharing it and you're liking the broadcast, it exposes more and more people to the conversation. And these conversations are important. So I thank all of you. I thank all of you for doing your part. I thank all of you for sharing the broadcast, for sharing the recorded shows. Like I said, we put the audio up on SoundCloud afterwards, and I post that audio. The Facebook live stream becomes a was live instead of a is live video on Facebook, and so it can always be shared. And of course, then we take and we clean it up a little bit, and any of the glitches that arise during our Facebook streaming, we can clean that up for our YouTube video, and then we post it up as a YouTube video on our video channel, our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV. Look, I encourage you to not only check out our YouTube channel, but subscribe to it. If you subscribe to it, then you'll get notifications anytime we put a video up. And look, there's a lot of issues happening all the time. There's always something happening. There's always something that that warrants a conversation. We will have that conversation here. What you do with the conversation afterwards is up to you. I mean, you certainly can. You can have that conversation, and you can spin it your way. You can add your thoughts to the issues. I'm not necessarily trying to offer a perspective that should be the only one that is considered in this dialogue. There are plenty of there are many angles, and there are many views of this whole of all of these issues. Whether we're talking about gaming issues, whether we're talking about corruption, racism, environmental issues like we're talking about here, there's plenty to talk about. And the things that I've talked about thus far, look, I've offered some opinions, but much of what I'm saying are just plain facts. The Pagulas have made their money in natural gas, and they produce that natural gas through hydrofracking. And hydrofracking, we still don't know the extent of the damage that hydrofracking represents to all of us, to all of creation. Frankly, there's so much denial associated with everything from the uptick in earthquakes in areas that have been hydrofracked, the uptick in groundwater contamination. It always gets pitched as this great job creator. Well, I don't know how much money this Coudersport area municipal authority stood to make from this, and I know everybody's struggling. Pennsylvania is struggling in severe ways. Man, I know my grandchildren, my daughter lives in Pennsylvania, not far from Coudersport, as a matter of fact. I know the struggle that these municipalities have. Ever shrinking tax bases, the amount of people who are on social services. I mean, if you think it's bad where you live, Pennsylvania, some of the school districts down there are just completely strapped. So when people start looking at a windfall, like money coming into their municipal coffers, because they're going to support an industry like hydrofracking, it's not necessarily an easy call. So I get it. But again, the problem is with these industries in this industrial development that look at what a disaster the nuclear energy industry turned into. Look at the contaminant. Look at what PCBs have done. And again, I mentioned GE and the Hudson River. There's so much contamination in the Hudson River that GE has done studies to suggest cleaning it up would be worse. Yeah, we contaminated the hell out of the river. But if we try to clean it up now, we're going to stir more of it up. We're going to make it worse trying to clean it up. They acknowledge what they've done. And then they can make a solid argument for not cleaning up the mess. Onondaga Lake, I mentioned that. Onondaga Lake at some point was estimated to have 13 feet of mercury. 13 feet of mercury. It was, and I suspect still is, considered the most contaminated lake in the United States. I mean, let that sink in for a little bit. Yeah, we drive by it on the thruway, right? We go to the state fair, and there's that beautiful lake. Yeah, not so beautiful. And then it has the name Onondaga associated with it. What a travesty that is. That's like what they've done to the Mohawk River. So, look, we don't know the full extent of the damage that industry does. We won't know for years what the real ill effects will have been with hydrofracking. We see some immediate effects, and of course, there's all kinds of denial associated with it. And that's what they're saying with this. What they're saying with this is, we're gonna clean up that water. We're not gonna dump water in the river that's gonna be bad for anybody. Look, one of the things you can do, and I know this thing has been bashed by the industry, but check out Gasland, Gasland and Gasland 2. Those are two films. The guy Fox is the guy's name who produced these two films. Check out these films. And understand that the films have an agenda, which is to condemn hydrofracking. So balance that off. And then, just look at what's happened in places like Texas and Oklahoma, where there's been a lot of this hydrofracking and some of the effects that have been caused by it. There's a compelling story. These two films are pretty compelling. But, look, you got to be a judge for yourself. And so when somebody tells you that they're going to dump a bunch of hydrofracked fluids, that first we're going to build a treatment facility that's going to treat this. And again, I have to say it, repeat myself on this thing. The chemicals that are used in hydrofracking fluid are proprietary. The industries that use them, the pagulas, are not required by law to tell anybody what's in that. It's water, but then what? What is going into that water solution? What is used in that hydrofracking? And of course, that doesn't even completely tell the truth about what comes out when they take that water out of those wells. Because now that contaminated water that went in is even more contaminated when it comes out. I mean, it has any number of, natural gas by itself is not exactly a perfectly clean product. Natural gas itself has radioactivity associated with it. I mean, there's some concern about, hydrofracking for gas that immediately goes into market because of the I don't remember what the name of the chemical is, but there's a radioactive gas that's associated with natural gas that people have radon, I think it is. Yeah, radon. I mean, these are the concerns that are associated with natural gas. So natural gas by itself isn't even this healthy product. In fact, as I said earlier, natural gas itself, the amount of natural gas that leaks into the atmosphere from these wells, from these plants, from this hydrofracking, is a large greenhouse gas producer. The act of extracting natural gas leaks natural gas, and it itself is a greenhouse gas. And that's not even talking about what else is is problematic about the other stuff that comes out of these wells. Look, I told you I wanted to kind of revisit a little bit of the whole debacle that went with selling the Bills franchise. One of the guys who was very interested in buying the Buffalo Bills was John Bon Jovi. Yeah, the rock star, right? He wanted to buy the Buffalo Bills. Trump also was floating his name out there. And in fact, he hired some character assassins, one local guy here by the name of Michael Caputo, to do everything they could to undermine John Bon Jovi's bid to purchase the Buffalo Bills. So what they did is they spread a rumor that John Bon Jovi was going to take the Bills franchise to Canada. His roots are Canadian, so he was going to take it to Toronto. John Bon Jovi said all along, "There's no way that I'm taking the Buffalo Bills out of Buffalo." But it's interesting that the integrity of a guy like Donald Trump and of course his loyal supporters didn't mind doing this character assassination on John Bon Jovi. And of course, John Bon Jovi was pretty gracious about it in the long run. He said, "Well, it looks like the Bills ended up with a good owner." Well, maybe they did. Look, Terry and Kim Pagula may be very nice people on many, many levels. But the one thing you can't deny is that their tremendous wealth has come at the cost of the environment. John Bon Jovi made his money playing music. We can argue about, again, about the goodness or the morality of rock stars, I guess. But there was no cost associated to the environment with John Bon Jovi's money. But there was plenty associated with the Pagula's money. So I want to tell that little story because even after Trump, and obviously he was bluffing. He was never going to buy the Bills. He probably didn't have the money to buy the Bills anyway. But this is again part of what he throws out there. It's kind of his bluster, right? So, and this is even before him throwing his name into the ring to become president of the United States. That's a whole nother debacle. But it's an interesting story to throw in to see the other names that were at play. So I wanted to just kind of mention that as an aside. But I do, and I got to revisit and reemphasize what I talked about at the bottom of the hour, and that is what is the role that the Seneca Nation is going to play in this debate. I know there was a lot of buzz as this thing started to gain more news attention. And look, the Art Voice has done an article on it. Russia Today has done a rather extensive article, and there's like I said, lots of quotes from Todd Gates and others. So I mean, it's gotten some media attention, but other than the potential for legal challenges, there isn't a great deal of conversation about what other strategy the Seneca Nation might have. And I'm sorry, I know it may be uncomfortable, but at some point, part of that strategy has to say, no, I'm not going to continue to put money at the feet of the guy who wants to throw hydrofracked wastewater in our river. Because, and again, following that river down to the Kinzua Dam, which was in of itself a travesty. I mean, this dam was illegal. The federal government had to pay a bunch of damages. And let's be clear. Anything you do that defies nature, like damming a river, it has an effect. There's ecosystems that get changed. I mean, the Seneca Nation essentially had 10,000 acres condemned by as a part of this dam. It was now regarded as a floodplain. I mean, buildings, homes, graveyards, these things were all destroyed. They came in with bulldozers and tore down longhouses and churches and homes and ball fields were abandoned, homes were abandoned, farmland was abandoned. That 10,000 acres of Seneca land that was taken for the Kinzua Dam project had a devastating economic impact. People were moved into these crappy little HUD homes. The relocation. I mean, this is real history, and it was all illegal. It was all in stark violation of federal law, of the sovereignty of the Seneca Nation. So now add some insult to the injury. What does that dam do? The dam collects contaminants. If they ever decommission that dam, there would be a ton or tons and tons of contaminated sediment at the foot of that dam. And now you want to throw hydrofrac fluids into the river in Coudersport, let it flow through the entire Seneca territory of Allegheny, city of Salamanca, which is Allegheny territory, all of those little municipalities, those congressional villages that are all Seneca Nation territory, and then have a bunch of that heavy stuff settle at the foot of a dam? For who? Who's going to feel the effects of that stuff? It ain't going to be Terry Pagula and Kim Pagula. I guarantee that. It ain't going to be even the folks down in Pittsburgh. Because not only, will many of those contaminants have already seeped into the soil, the ancestral lands of the Seneca people, but a bunch of it's going to settle right at the foot of that dam. So what do you do about it? Like I said, I guess we should figure out the numbers. Seneca should ask the Seneca Nation, hey, how much money do we spend on the Bills and the Sabres and the Bandits? And what do we get in return for it? I mean, how much do we become a bit of a laughingstock by complaining about where the millions and millions of dollars come from that enabled the Bagulas to buy these teams? How much of a laughingstock are we if we complain about what they're doing to the river as we're still spending millions of dollars in sponsorship and marketing and advertising with their sports franchises? Tough questions. But the easy answer is stop spending the money. Look, I know there's a cost to every flow of dollars to the Seneca Nation has going to these various places, whether it's the state with this gaming, the revenue sharing for gaming, or whether it's sponsoring the Bills, Sabres, and Bandits. Yeah, there's a cost associated with it. And some of it's a PR thing. But nobody could honestly condemn the Seneca Nation for saying, look, we're just not going to spend that money anymore. We'll still sponsor some bands at Darien Lake, or maybe some concerts at the KeyBank Center. But we can't, in good faith, continue to throw money that ultimately benefits the guy who wants to dump hydrofrac water upstream of one of our major communities. It's just not going to happen. I mean, look, like I said, Seneca Nation still has not been has not got adequate answers out of the Department of Energy or NYSERDA on the contamination from West Valley. What do they call it? They actually call it what is it? The West Valley Demonstration Project. Yeah, they call it Demonstration Project now, but it was a nuclear waste storage facility. It was supposed to be a processing facility. Didn't do a whole lot of processing. Ended up storing contaminants to the point where it leaked. And I like it. They call them plumes when this radioactivity leaks. Well, we're going to see some plumes out of Coudersport next. And it's not just going to be plumes. It's direct. It's water dumping. I mean, this isn't something leaking through a metal canister. They're going to dump the stuff right in the river. They're going to pull some contaminants out. Yeah, that's what they're going to do. They'll pull some contaminants out. But at the end of the day, many of the chemicals aren't ever going to be identified. And even if they were identified, there will be an inability to filter out things like radioactive contamination. Look, if somebody mastered that problem, then they'd clean up the whole nuclear energy industry. But that ain't been done yet, folks. And it ain't going to happen here. So, I mean, my message today isn't just to the Seneca people, although I think the Seneca people, again, their voices need to be heard. I know there's council tomorrow. And I'm sure this issue is going to come up tomorrow. And I think one of the questions that has to be asked of the Seneca Nation Council is, when are we going to pull the plug on the money we throw Pagula's way? And, of course, there's other answers that need to be sought for. But your voices need to be heard. But this isn't just a Seneca problem. By some estimates, this is the potential for contamination to hit the river in Coudersport and, for all intents and purposes, make its way all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And there's plenty of contamination along the way. You can bet on that. But again, who are the people who are going to be most impacted by fracking water being dumped into the Allegheny River in Coudersport? Well, the people who have the longest stretch of that river as a part of their community, the Seneca people. The Senecas are going to be the most adversely affected. I don't know what the total mileage is, but it's significant. And the same here up in Cattaraugus in terms of in the Cattaraugus territory, the impact of West Valley's contamination of the Cattaraugus Creek. The largest body of or population of people along the Cattaraugus Creek are Senecas. There's a little town in Gowanda that that the creek goes through, and of course there's a significant population in Olean and other little towns along the Allegheny River. But the vast, the linear footage of land that stands to be contaminated by this stuff, I mean, is really the Seneca land. And Seneca land forever. And some of these contaminants are forever. Radioactivity doesn't just its half-life is pretty long. So it's a major issue. Look, so I wanted to address that. Look, we only got a few minutes left. I do have to give share some information about what's coming up next week. On Wednesday, most people would recognize February 14th as Valentine's Day, but for many of us, we've reclassified that date as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Awareness Day. So there are vigils that are happening in many places, major cities, but also major native territories, and from the Dakotas down to Florida, but certainly on the Canadian side of that imaginary line. There are vigils that are happening all over to address and to raise awareness to the missing and murdered Indigenous women plight. And that it's a real thing. I mean, this idea that Native women in particular, and when we say Indigenous women, we're talking about women in Australia and in Africa and other places, Indigenous women that are more vulnerable, oftentimes significantly so, 10 times more likely to be sexually assaulted or to have a physical assault or to turn up missing or murdered. I mean, the numbers are pretty staggering. So February 14th is a day that we are giving some attention to that, both with the individuals and the other campaign. And I don't want to take credit for the Red Dress campaign. It's something that's been done for years. I started promoting this thing several weeks ago, and what I'm trying to promote is for people to take a picture, a video of one or several or dozens of red dresses and post them on social media. Facebook obviously is one vehicle for that. Twitter, Snapchat, I don't know what of YouTube. Post these videos, post these pictures. You can create slideshows for YouTube, but post these images of a empty red dress, and post them in ways that may make people think. One of the pictures that I've got posted has a little girl's dress hanging on a swing set, because missing and murdered Indigenous women, it isn't just about grown women. It's about our young women, our girls, as well. It's some of our girls that'll never become women because they will have been taken and seized, both for murdered and put into sex slave trade, all kinds of stuff. Take pictures of these red dresses in front of a river, along a riverbank, because you know why? We've had plenty of our women wash up along the shores of these rivers. Take it along the lake. Take pictures of it along a railroad track. We've had far too many instances where our women have turned up dead on a railroad tracks. And we said, oh, suicide by train. Really? Really? Do we really know that? Take pictures of them in front of police stations to demonstrate the failure of the police departments to investigate the missing and murdered indigenous women. Put it in front of legislative buildings, state houses. Take the pictures in front of highways. It's not just a highway of tears in Alberta that women turn up missing. So take the pictures and post them. Change your profile pic. I've already changed my profile picture, and I'm going to post more between now and February 14th. And when you see that red dress on February 14th all over social media, it's not a Valentine's dress. It's not a Valentine's Day dress. It's a symbol of missing and murdered indigenous women. So I plead with you, participate. Look, if you can't get out there and hang a red dress someplace and take a picture, then capture one of many that will be on social media. Change your profile picture. Take one of my pictures. I'll post up half dozen or so pictures. And there'll be many other people doing it. So I'd love to see a sea of red on social media on February 14th and in the days leading up to it. Use the hashtag MMIW or hashtag red dress, and let's do a Twitter storm. Let's get the images out there. Let's raise awareness, and let's demand the proper investigations that go into this thing. And some of those investigations aren't just about missing and murdered indigenous women. It's about the conditions that create missing and murdered indigenous women. Look, I want to thank you for joining me for the show. We'll post this thing up as soon as we can, and we'll see you back here on Monday. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.
Comes up on another day. Same faces smiling my same way. I know she feels the same way too. Damn, it's just you. Well, maybe I'm not the romantic kind. No candlelight dinners and no fine French wine. I love you, baby, but I forget to say